All right. Good evening, everyone, and happy Wednesday. It is February 6, 2013. Thank you so much for joining us here tonight. Soul Journeys Radio on AmericanFreedomRadio.com. Hope you had a wonderful day, because we sure have a wonderful show in store for you with returning guest Todd Caldecott. He is the author of Food as Medicine. You may have remembered him from a couple months ago. It was a fantastic show. But tonight, we're going to talk about Ayurveda, which he mentioned. We briefly talked about in the last show. He is not only a medical herbalist, or as they call it, a herbalist in Canada, and a practitioner of Ayurveda and a member of the American Herbalists Guild since 1997. He was also an instructor and director of clinical herbal studies at Wild Rose College, where he developed a 3-year clinical program in Western herbal medicine. He is also the author of the textbook Ayurveda, The Divine Science of Life, and the editor of a newly published text, Ayurveda in Nepal, which you can find at ayurvedainnepal.com. Todd Caldecott.com is the main website where you can link to everything he's got going on. It's so good to have you back here tonight, Todd. How are you doing?
Excellent. Thank you, Christie, for having me back. I'm very pleased to be here.
Thank you, and you are welcome. You have been really busy lately, so why don't you catch us up on all you have going on?
We've just decided to launch a second book in the Ayurveda in Nepal series, and this one's going to be on cancer.
Okay.
And, this book was originally, it's material taken from a traditional Nepalese physician named Vaidya, which means doctor in Sanskrit, Mana Bajracharya, and they've been practicing herbal medicine, Ayurveda, in the Kathmandu Valley as a continuous hereditary tradition for about 800 years. And so they've accumulated a lot of knowledge. It was just a wealth of knowledge, especially in the treatment of very difficult to treat conditions like cancer. And so we felt that even though Dr. Mana actually wrote 47 books, that this one on cancer would be the best choice for moving forward, considering that cancer now is, really the number one cause of death for people in terms of chronic disease.
Is it really cancer that's the cause of death, or is it the mainstream treatment?
Well, I guess it depends on what numbers you look at. So certainly medical treatment is up there. If you include everything, then including like hospital-acquired infections and mistakes as well as adverse reactions, et cetera, then maybe it might come close to the top. But, I'm talking in terms of the kind of diseases that people are struck with. If we can avoid those, then we don't have to rely on these pharmaceuticals and hospitals. So cancer is a big issue, and Dr. Mana had some quite incredible remedies for it and some excellent results, and they continue to have those kinds of results. I remember his son, Dr. Madhu, kind of took me aside when I was there last time, and we were chatting, and he was joking, but he was serious that, we could receive a Nobel Prize for the treatment of cancer for the kind of results that we're able to obtain with our medicines and their particular approach that they have, because they do seem to have a lot of success with especially female reproductive cancers there.
And I see you've been speaking in person quite a bit lately, too.
Oh, yeah, I always do. I enjoy sharing the information, and for me, what I've learned is that a lot of what I have to share that seems to make such a be of great benefit for patients when I work with them individually is information that can be shared on a more of a mass scale. Like, there's just some really key pieces of information that people are missing that we all used to know at one time. This might be something like how to restart your digestion. Because digestion is the root of health, and so many people suffer with digestive health issues, and nobody knows how to reestablish proper digestion. It's a key component, at least in Ayurveda. And so it's a very simple process, but people just are unaware of it. So it's things like that is my goal, to share this information with people. And I think if they're able to grasp these relatively simple concepts and practices, that they can avoid a lot of harm to themselves in the future by the very system of medicine that you mentioned is responsible for causing so much secondary ill health in this country and in North America. I mean, and in the Western world, increasingly in the entire world.
Definitely. Okay, so in regards to Ayurveda and digestion, I am learning from your site, I guess, the fire of digestion, and I'm probably going to butcher a lot of these words, so please forgive me. Is it Agni?
That's good enough. Agni. Yeah.
Agni, okay.
Yeah. And it is the digestive fire. It is also if you're a Hindu, then that term actually means something more. It's actually a deity. And it's a very interesting deity because it represents fire. And if you think about, what makes us human, if we've been on this planet, if we accept, basic evolutionary theory, which I think seems the most likely, we started using fire about 2 million years ago. And it was a game changer for us. I mean, we were suddenly able to transform our lives from being, pretty cold, wet, miserable beasts to suddenly being warm and cooking our food, which allowed us to increase the nutrient density of our diet, which allowed us to grow these big brains that we have. And just imagine how important it was to keep fire alive when we were, we're early humans. I mean, if we didn't really know how to make it and we just sort of happened upon it by chance after a storm, so lightning strike, then it would have been all about protecting fire and maintaining that fire always. And so there are many religions actually, not just Hinduism, but also the ancient Persian religion of Zoroastrianism, where for these cultures, it was exceptionally important to keep the fire going. And this typically was the job of the woman in the household. She was sort of in charge of the hereditary fire that was essentially passed down from generation to generation. That's one kind of continuous flame. So when you say Agni in India, it has a different meaning, but what it still refers to in Ayurveda specifically is your own fire, your own digestive fire, that same kind of combustive process that exists within each of us, that breaks down our food and activates our metabolism and makes us feel warm and stimulates us to activity. So you can imagine that's just when I describe it like that, it's such an important concept or idea. It's essentially synonymous with life. So it's considered to be something to protect in Ayurveda. And this is something that we can do by understanding how to establish and maintain a healthy diet. And then when we kind of go off the rails with it, Ayurveda has a strategy to help us get back on.
Okay, that makes sense. Now, I mean, especially in regards to the fire, but let me ask you this. If you are having digestive issues, what would be the cause of it? Or what are some of the possible causes?
Well, if I was to give you an academic answer, it would be a long answer from the perspective of Ayurveda, because, in fact, there are many things that can affect your digestion. However, there are 3 basic principles, which I think most physicians would agree. And it doesn't encompass, obviously, everything. But it's these 3 principles connect to everything. So everything else is kind of a logical extension from it. And one of these things, the basic notion I say is poor digestive health results from basically taking meals at improper times, in improper volumes, in improper combinations. So the time, the volume, the combination of the foods that you eat are all play a role. Now, obviously, if it's all also industrially refined food, then that will play a role. But that would just be improper food generally. So
yeah,
we know to avoid that. But even Ayurveda recognized that even those people who eat otherwise healthy food, if they don't observe these basic rules of good digestion, then even they can be struck with ill health. And if they don't know how to reestablish it, then that basic upset in that digestive rhythm can result in many other diseases that can arise from that. So it's important to know how to reestablish proper digestion. So when I talk about food at improper times, the fire that rests within us, our digestive fire, is actually connected to daily rhythms and more specifically to the sun. And so when the sun rises in the morning, because we're also diurnal creatures, we live during the day, we get active. Our metabolism follows the path of the sun across the sky. So when the sun is at its height, then in normalcy, our metabolism is also at its most active. And then as the day progresses and the sun begins to decline on the horizon, similarly, our metabolism and digestion also begins to wane. So with respect to time, it's really important in Ayurveda to make sure that you eat a very good-sized meal in the beginning portion of the day. And I think one problem that a lot of North Americans have is they don't eat anything in the morning, and then they start eating in the afternoon, and then eat all the way until they go to bed.
I don't know anything about that.
What happens is that you're not able to activate your metabolism. You're basically fueling your body at the wrong time, at least as per Ayurveda. You wouldn't try to fuel your car without any gas. You could do it, but a lot of people do that. And as a result, they have to make up for it later in the day, and they just start to eat. And it's really, I think, one of the major causes for the epidemic of obesity that we see in North America.
Yeah, that makes sense. So it's not just proper foods, it's proper timing and proper combining.
And combinations as well. So improper food consumed at improper times and improper combinations. This basic principle of three gives us a really good foundation understanding when and what type of foods and in what volumes of food. Now, the volume is important as well because we can overconsume food. But that's a different thing. I actually am able to work with my patients and find that they can eat a fairly large volume of food and not put on any weight and not affect their metabolism if it's proper food, if they're eating at the right time and in the right combination. And for a lot of people, the fullness factor can come just simply by introducing more vegetables in your life, because that's one way just to get that extra volume which people are used to consuming in the form of carbohydrates like French fries or potato chips or whatever. Just replace that with vegetables.
Okay, so should I assume that pizza and ice cream at midnight for breakfast probably wouldn't be a good choice?
Well,
Okay. Welcome back. Thanks again for joining us here tonight. Soul Journeys Radio on AmericanFreedomRadio.com. Todd, I just have to say this. But, you hear about Ayurveda, kind of in passing a little bit, at least here in the Western world. And, I've kind of been looking into it on the surface for several years, and it seems most of the people that are providing the information, and I'm just sticking with English speakers here for purposes of this conversation, because I'm sure there's many that obviously know what they're talking about in Ayurveda, but as far as English speakers and such, and it just seems so surface and plastic, and so I really wanted you to come talk with us about it tonight, because as far as English speakers go, you definitely have more information out there than anyone, and obviously take it seriously. It's not just some, hey, look at me, I can pronounce this word cool, So anyways, we have a lot to learn from Todd tonight. I myself really, I'm just I wouldn't even call myself a beginner, because my knowledge in this practice is so limited. So anyways, I'm taking notes myself, and we have a lot to talk about. But if we could, there was a question in the chat about digestion, and then we'll move on to the principles or the key concepts of Ayurveda. But in regards to digestion, and obviously you don't know what's going on with the listeners and chatters, but if you could just give out some maybe Cliff Notes version of possibilities of if you are having digestive issues, what we can do to start healing that.
Okay, great. Great question, because it really gets to the heart of a lot of people's health issues, because a lot of people suffer from digestive issues of various types. Mm-hmm. But there is one basic approach that you can use to help you reestablish digestion. Just like, in life, your digestive system sometimes needs a reset. Sometimes you need to fire your computer back up again because it's hanging. It's not working properly. Sometimes you need to, in a personal relationship, you're in an argument, and the two people can come together and say, you know what, I think we just need to reset this. I think we're on a track that's neither of us are benefiting from. Let's do a little reset there. So the same thing is with our digestion. We can do a reset. And when we do this reset, we can reestablish proper and healthy digestion. The best way to do a reset on your digestion is, quite simply, just to not eat anything for a while. Just stop eating.
Okay. So
but
fast.
hydrate yourself with warm water.
Okay.
Not hot water, warm water. It's like kindling for your fireplace. The thing that people do is they will often add fuel to their problem by eating stuff. And often because a lot of our choices around eating, like if we're in digestive discomfort, then we're in a state of, we're unhappy. And so many of us unconsciously eat that we'll just go for something that's like, oh, I feel so bad, I'll just have this chocolate bar, maybe that'll make me feel better.
Yes.
Of course it doesn't, right?
Well, for a minute.
For a minute. But often it just adds to the problem, compounds it. One thing that hot water does is it just gradually decongests the stomach and stimulates the digestive fire. And if you fast and just have the hot water, gradually your digestion and your appetite are going to come back. That flame is going to come back. But now the flame, it's getting a little bit stronger. Now you're like, I think I might be a little bit hungry. You're not very hungry yet. You don't go from 0 to, 90. You go in a graduated way. So the next thing to eat after that would be something like a very thin rice porridge, or maybe a vegetable soup. Some people can go right to having something like an animal broth, like a chicken stock, or like a marrow broth. Just the key thing is, whatever you have, the first food that you have, don't put any fat in it. This fat is hard to digest. Okay. Fat's the last thing. Fat's good for everybody. Let me tell you, fat is good for you, but it is hard to digest. So we don't eat much fat if the digestion is weak, because the fat will turn into a kind of toxin. We can talk about that later. So right now, just a thin rice soup, a vegetable broth, or some kind of animal a bone broth. But make sure you skim the fat off so there's no fat on it. And have just that. Make that your next meal. If you have near an Indian grocery store, like if you live in maybe a major center, or if they do have some Indian grocery stores in your community, you can find a flaked rice called pawa, and that's all it is. It's like a flaked rice. They're rice flakes. They're rice flakes made from basmati rice, and they cook up really fast. And you could just use 1 part pawa and 8 parts water, and it'll cook up even faster. Mm-hmm. Otherwise, just use plain white basmati rice. And a vegetable broth, everyone should know how to make that. That's the easiest thing in the world. And so this is your first type of food. Either one of those 3 choices. The easiest of those choices would be the rice soup, and then you could introduce some of the vegetable broth with that, and then you could progress to trying some of that bone broth, and then you could have some bone broth with some rice, and some bone broth, rice, and vegetable, and gradually work your way up and use the soup. Migrate from soup to a stew. Start making stews and eating stews, and maybe steaming up some vegetables and having that on the side. And use the soup and the stew as the centerpiece of your meal. So you start from hot water to stew. And you do that over a period of, depending on your appetite, because you should always listen to your appetite. I mean, if you just do that for a day and then you're starving, then, and everything seems awesome and your digestion seems to be sorted out, then you can challenge it with something maybe like a stew might be the next meal. But if it still is not very strong, don't go to stew just yet. Go to a soup. And then from that soup, add things to it, like you're adding fuel to a fire until you got a nice big fire going. But just don't throw a big giant log on your fire on these little weak embers, and throw a big log on it and hope it catch on fire. Because if you do that, if anyone's ever owned a wood burning fireplace, if you want to get a fire going, you've got to build that fire. You've got to start with newspaper and then kindling. Gradually build it up.
Definitely. Okay. Well, that makes sense. Very good there, Todd. I appreciate that.
And what I would add to that, too, is I would really encourage folks to incorporate different herbs into those soups. Because all the herbs that we use, regardless of the culture or the cuisine, most of those herbs that we use, like 95% of them, are used to stimulate digestion. So whether it's basil or rosemary or oregano, garlic, cumin, black pepper, mustard, asafoetida, all these herbs, ginger, turmeric, they're all used to stimulate digestion or modify digestion in some way.
We're always looking for like a cure, a quick magic pill, whether it's, a prescription or even an herb, because, that's medicine as well, too. And, we don't go back to the basic principles, water, slowing down, and, restoring our balance with nature. So very good example there. And one of the things you mentioned last segment was that fat is toxic. So to avoid the fats in the broths, it's
not toxic. Fat is essential for life. It's really what everyone desires. When we eat food, and we know that, like, evolutionarily, our ancestors, they were orientated towards finding sources of fat in their environment, because fat gives us the most energy. It's the most satisfying and satiating. In our body, when we eat, and we can eat lots of fat when our bodies can actually digest it and break it down. Fat is a wonderful nutrient. It's a wonderful food. But when your digestion is weak, when it can't properly break down that fat, and especially when you mix that fat, this is what a lot of people do, a lot of North Americans do, is they eat fatty food with cold beverages, with ice-cold beverages. And what that does is it turns the fat into a kind of toxic substance. When we can't digest the fat, either because our digestion's weak or we do things like drink ice-cold beverages with fat, say like a Coca-Cola and fries or something, we turn it into a kind of toxin. And, this toxin isn't like a toxin that we understand in the medical sense of the word. It's a toxin in Ayurveda, actually. It means amma. Amma means undigested food. Amma means undigested food. And basically, this undigested food accumulates in the gut. It's thought to move into the channels of circulation where it obstructs flow. And when it obstructs flow, then it disrupts vitality. And when vitality is disrupted, we have the beginnings of disease. So we need to dispel that obstruction. And it begins with making sure that whatever goes into your stomach and you're trying to eat, you can properly digest, because that which you don't digest will just accumulate in the body and block the physiological activities. And we can understand this in a scientific sense. I mean, the Ayurvedic understanding is actually fairly simple. But when we sort of understand the role of the immune system and how the immune system can get activated by antigenic food particles, and how the immune system can get confused and begin to attack body tissues, then we have a basic theory of autoimmunity. And that's very similar to the original concept in Ayurveda. They're actually they're the same concept, just described in slightly different terms. So basically what I'm saying is that autoimmunity is one of the worst outcomes associated with weak digestion. And there's a spectrum all the way from just, weak digestion to autoimmunity, from weak digestion to morbid obesity, from weak digestion to cancer, because it's this fundamental disruption of energy flow in the body that's caused by eating food that we cannot digest.
Okay, excellent. And, a couple people asked for clarification here. When you mention warm water, do you mean that we heat it up in a teapot? Does it need to be warmer than our temperature, 98.6, or like how warm?
Make sure that you could at least stick your little finger in it, and it's not going to burn your little finger, okay? But it should still feel nice and warm.
So not boiling, but definitely above our body temperature.
Definitely. Mm-hmm.
Okay. All right. Sounds fair. So, we kind of hear, we've actually had someone on the show in the past, mention 3 types, Vata, Pitta, and Kapha. I'm probably butchering those terms, so I apologize for that. But it almost seemed like the information that I get when I search for it is, once again, very surface and very... it's kind of like astrology, for example. The newspapers or magazines will put out, oh, well, you're a Virgo, so this is exactly how you are, and you must, there's no escaping it, and, you're basically screwed, and you're exactly like 1/12 of the other people in the world. And, narrowing it down to 3 categories makes, us who don't know, that we're exactly like, 1/3 of the people on the planet, which obviously isn't true. So your approach is a little bit more comprehensive and can bring us to a better understanding. So if you would, Todd, please share with us the key concepts.
Sure. I think what you're talking about too is that magazine, you see it at the supermarket. I can't say I've ever picked it up as a man, but it's called Cosmopolitan. And it's got those questionnaires, those different questionnaires that are supposed to tell you about your love life or your sex life. And I don't know if anyone really believes them or thinks that they're true, but, that's the kind of level that a lot of people present Ayurveda. You could just do a quiz and somehow, find out something really significant about yourself. You might have some, passing insight, but those things are meant to be disposed of. So when it comes to really understanding Ayurveda, it's just not my approach. It's just the authentic practice of Ayurveda. And the reality is that we are a combination of all those 3 doshas that you mentioned, Vata, Pitta, and Kapha. Everyone has them because they each represent a different subset of physiological function in the body. And when I use the term physiological function, I need people to understand that Ayurveda has its own concept and idea of how the human physiology functions. And while we can draw comparisons between Western anatomy and physiology and Ayurveda, and we can draw really interesting comparisons that show a lot of synergy and resonance, we need to understand that Ayurveda is actually coming at the body from a completely different way. Okay, so if people can just be open to that idea, you're actually, thinking about something in a very different way than you've ever thought about it before. And so Vata in Sanskrit comes from the root word va, which means to move. And so Vata is this quality in the body that exists to activate everything. All cellular activity, especially the activation of nervous function, any kind of movement. It could be movement of thoughts in your head. It could be movement of blood through your body. It could be you moving your limbs. Any kind of movement or activity, whether subtle or gross, is all under the influence of Vata. And so it's actually said in Sanskrit that both Pitta and Kapha are lame without Vata, because they don't have any independent movement without Vata. And Vata, the Sanskrit word, literally means wind. This is what it means, wind. And, if we sort of think about it on a sort of a mythological level, Vata is actually that divine wind that is synonymous in many different religious and spiritual traditions of that quality that was given to us that animates our being. The term actually, Vata, is also synonymous with a yoga term called prana. So Vata and prana are the same thing. And, there's the Greek mythology, and it's also there in Christianity and some other traditions of where, the deity, God, blows this animating force into the shape of a human body and turns them into an active living form. And so it's a symbol, it's an idea, it's a concept about this animating force and how it directs all movement in the body. And so Vata as prana is the activator of the body, and then Pitta and Kapha represent a basic duality in metabolic function. So Pitta, it comes from the root word tapas, which means to heat or to glow. So Pitta relates to all those qualities that stimulate digestion and metabolism, that break down our food into nutrients that can be absorbed into our body and directed to the liver, where the liver breaks them down further. So and Pitta actually also means bile. And so the specific area of Pitta in the body relates to the digestive tract and the liver and gallbladder. And this is where,
so like the fire you were just speaking about?
That's right, yeah.
Okay, all right,
so
that makes sense.
So when you say Pitta and Agni, it's the same thing. It's the same idea. The context is different, but it's that hot cooking principle. And then on the other side, we have Kapha. And Kapha represents everything which is opposite to that of Pitta. So Kapha is about that cooling, lunar, feminine, yin, nourishing quality that stabilizes, that holds the body together, that nourishes and lubricates and sustains and maintains, that acts as in opposition to the fire. Because it's, if you were just fire, you wouldn't have a body, you wouldn't have a structure. So Kapha relates to the maintenance of your physical structure, your physical being. So everything in your body which has substance and heaviness and greasiness and stability and all those activities which function to slow you down, like sleep, for example, that's very Kapha. And when Kapha is active during the day, it's typically after the sun sets. And that's typically when most of us become tired, simply because Kapha increases. So all the qualities of Kapha relate more to this nurturing yin quality, which serves to oppose or balance the heating, active metabolic activities of Pitta. And then it's Vata, which controls them. So kind of like puppets on a string, so that both Pitta and Kapha stay in balance. And it's Vata's job to make sure that both Pitta and Kapha stay in balance.
Okay. Wow. All right. That's really interesting. Okay, so I guess you were using kind of the elements of the earth. You said Vata or Vata? Am I saying that right?
Yeah.
Okay, so that would be like the wind, or maybe even a little bit of earth in there?
Nope, there's no earth in it. Nope, there's none. One way to understand the word Vata, one way to really make this rooted in the body, and we're going to just a little bit crude here, just a little bit crude. Vata literally means fart. That's what it means.
Oh, all right. Well, we love to fart here.
Well, we all do it, right? We all do it.
Yeah.
And that's what Vata means. That's its like gross physical form. If you've got if you're passing a lot of gas and you're burping a lot, right away that's a very simple indicator that you've got too much Vata in your body. And that's actually was one of the reasons why you don't want to stop yourself from burping. You don't want to stop yourself from tooting, because that needs to get out. If it doesn't get out, it stays in the body, and your Vata inside gets increased. And remember, your Vata is responsible for regulating all the activities of the body. So if the Vata increases, it creates dysregulation.
Okay, that makes sense. Okay, we just, I don't know if you've heard of Sidney Ross Singer. He was just on the show, and he wrote a book, an entire book, about why it's important to fart and burp. It's called Get It Out, and it really makes sense that, especially in our culture, we're not allowed to do that, right? We're sitting at a desk, at a job, usually most of us, or in school or wherever, even in home, don't do that. And so we hold it in, which leads to all these different digestive diseases and such, which, you were just talking about. So that makes sense. Very interesting. All right, so let it rip,
book.
people.
That's amazing. Actually, there are 13 urges in Ayurveda that should not be suppressed, and gas or burping is one of them. But there's many others, like crying, like eating, like sleeping, like urinating, breathing while exercising. There's all these different urges that should not be suppressed. That people regularly suppress either because some kind of cultural norm or because they're embarrassed or because it's inconvenient, many different reasons why. But when we constantly suppress these urges, actually in Ayurveda it's called a pragyaparada. Pragyaparada. It's a term which literally means intellectual error or crime against wisdom. It means things that you do that you're not even aware of that bring about ill health and disease.
Excellent. Okay, so there's 13 of these urges that we should not suppress.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and so you mentioned, all right, gas, sleep, hunger. What else?
So there's sleep.
Mm-hmm.
There's crying.
Crying, big one.
Yeah. It's a big one, and what's interesting to me is that in many cultures, it's okay to cry. And you'll see people cry. And you'll even see men cry very easily. In India is actually one of those places. It's not uncommon. There's nothing taboo about crying. Mm-hmm. Everyone understands it to be a normal, natural expression. But here in North America, and I think sometimes in our Western culture, people have to put on a brave face. And they think that that's the norm. I mean, there might be times in life where you have to put on a brave face. Usually if there's something that needs to happen, right? But sometimes what needs to happen is you need to cry. And if that's what's coming up for you, then you should let that out. Another one is sneezing. Not sneezing. Suppressing the urge. I see lots of people that go and they'll stop themselves from sneezing.
Yes.
And this sneezing is just a natural physiological response. It's an amazing response if you think about it. It's kind of like a whip-like action. When you sneeze, it's like someone cracking a whip, and this wave rises up from your gut all the way out through your tip of your nose, and it's this big wave to release some kind of toxin that your body wants to expel. So it's actually an immune response. So when you're shutting down your immune response, there's going to be a reverberation in your body. It's going to affect your immune system. So, and I'm not saying that you don't stop yourself from sneezing once and it's going to create some illness, but when you habituate this, a lot of people do, there might be a time where you might have to really stop yourself from sneezing, say you're about to sneeze right in someone's face or something, but better just to turn away quickly and sneeze in the hollow of your elbow. Yeah. And that's where you and don't hold it in. So sneezing is another one. Another one is breathing. A lot of people don't know how to breathe. They actually hold their breath. Mm-hmm. And especially if they're exerting themselves. People are working out, they're running or they're lifting weights. They're holding their breath. And this is unwise. Another one is belching and burping, similar to we already talked about that with gas. Yawning is another one, suppressing the urge to yawn.
Oh,
this is a sort of a similar response to as sneezing. It's not exactly immunological. It more works on the nervous system side. It serves to discharge nervous energy. And that's why when you yawn, whenever you have a great yawn, it just totally shifts your nervous system. Suddenly you get all this air in your lungs and your diaphragm expands and you can feel little tingles up and down your spine.
Yeah, it feels good. All of these things you mentioned feel great.
Well, because they're natural. They're natural urges. And it's natural for them to feel good. Another one is vomiting, suppressing the urge to vomit. That's another immunological response. And in fact, in herbal medicine, in Ayurveda, we use vomiting therapeutically to help people to restore their immune system and specifically to remove congestion from the body and to enhance digestion. So vomiting is a way is actually used also to kind of clear out the lungs. And it's used traditionally, not just in Ayurveda, but other systems of medicine as well, to treat problems like asthma and bronchitis.
Okay. Wow. All right.
So vomiting is important. A lot of people don't like to vomit, and that might be one among these 13 where you just said, these are great. Well, vomiting,
yeah.
Great, but you certainly feel good after you vomit, don't you? Mm-hmm. You typically feel a lot better after you vomit than before when you were feeling uncomfortably nauseous. And so there's nothing wrong with vomiting. I mean, if you have a dog, your dog does it, routinely, especially in the spring, which is the kapha time of year. So it's natural and normal to vomit. And I encourage people, if they feel like they need to vomit, simply vomit. And if you don't have anything to vomit, then just drink some warm water and you can vomit that up. But one way to treat chronic nausea is to simply vomit. Eating. Some people suppress the urge to eat.
Yes,
a lot of people, they're hungry. You think if you're a mom, and you're running around shopping and feeding the kids, you never take any time for yourself.
Yes.
That creates a big problem. Another one is, drinking, becoming dehydrated. So making sure that you're consuming enough beverage, liquid throughout the day. Typically, something that's not high in sugar. After that is what follows drinking, which is urination. So not,
all right.
Not inhibiting or suppressing that urge. I had a patient actually who, we all do it to one degree or another. It might be inconvenient often when you're driving,
road trips.
Make sure everybody, yeah, exactly. But I had a patient who permanently damaged his kidney simply by holding onto his urine too long.
Oh,
and
wow.
that was unfortunate, and so it's one of those urges. I mean, you don't see animals typically, if you're on the farm, you got to be careful when you're walking out behind a cow because you might get shot because they just do it when they need to do it. And that's the natural, normal thing for us to do. And even though we have some issues of morality around it, people still end up suppressing it still too often. So as soon as you need to urinate, just, at the earliest opportunity, relieve yourself. The next one is defecation. So similarly, just, ignoring that urge to poop when you need to. A lot of people hold it in. They're, worried about public bathrooms sometimes. But it's actually your risk of acquiring some illness in the public bathroom, I think is much, much less than actually routinely suppressing the urge to defecate when you need to. And likewise, we mentioned what brought this conversation on in the first place was just the urge to relieve yourself of flatulence. So likewise, if you think about it, it is a kind of toxic gas that you are eliminating from your gut, and it's being created by the bacteria. And some bacteria that you might have in your gut, such as the putrefying bacteria, produce some pretty nasty gases and compounds. I mean, some of us, I think, can even attest to that, and when you don't get rid of it, those gases, they're reabsorbed from the intestine into the blood. And then you've got a semi-toxic gas floating around in your blood. And it sort of gives new context to the meaning of brain fart, because when you think it goes, right? And the last one is, in men specifically, is suppressing the urge to ejaculate. And this is interesting because while it would seem to refer to certain types of tantric practices that people might engage in, where you have sex and you don't ejaculate as a man, really, if you are having sex, it is good to at least, your glands are all being stimulated to produce semen, everything's ready to go, and then you don't go. So while you can practice some of those tantric techniques and helping to transmute and bring the energy up the spinal column to the brain, and you can move that energy, the substance itself, if you're having sex, is there to be excreted. And while that might not be so much of an issue for a lot of people, What is an issue, I think, more often in our society is that people will stimulate themselves sexually or arouse themselves, men in particular, through things like pornography, and not release that energy, or in releasing that energy, just the opposite, not suppressing, but the forced expulsion is that they will masturbate too much and release too much of that energy. So in Ayurveda, there's nothing wrong with having a good, healthy sex life, and it's good for men to ejaculate when they're having sex, but it's also important not to overdo it, and also to just stimulate yourself without allowing that release. So and that applies to all those urges as well. Anything that you were stimulating, like if you were trying to make yourself vomit, if you're trying to make yourself defecate, those are things. People take laxatives, or they do enemas too often, or they are bulimic and they make themselves vomit. That's the forced expulsion. So the term actually originally is not just the forced suppression, but the forced expulsion or suppression. We need to honor how these urges arise and resolve naturally.
Okay, excellent. Thanks for bringing that up. And, of course, that opened up a whole new set of questions, Todd.
I'm sure.
Somebody asked, or they said, Christie, since I've corrected all my digestive issues, I might burp once a week. For real. I wonder if a lack of gas is a bad thing.
She probably burps more often than that, but they're just small little burps. And... but I mean, so they're not big belches. Everyone's different. And so some people naturally burp a fair amount, and some people don't burp very much. And certainly when your digestion is good, you tend to burp less. And so not burping very much, or having very mild burps in which when you burp, there's no smell that comes out. That's an indication of good, healthy digestion. Okay. In fact, that's one really good way in Ayurveda to tell whether or not you should eat, is that if you have little burps and you have the taste of the previous meal, then the food is still in your gut and it's still in your stomach, and you shouldn't eat more food. Wait until what little burps that you might have don't have any taste to them, or are small little burps like that don't have any particular taste or flavor. Then your stomach is ready to receive the food.
Okay. All right. That makes sense. I mean, I've always envied the people that can, burp the alphabet and stuff. But it really has been a part of life.
Yeah, it's something you might learn at summer camp. Like my son taught himself to do it. But it ended up creating a problem. It ended up creating a little bit of a reflux issue. And I think that a lot of people who do that and habituate themselves to doing that actually impair and damage the lower esophageal sphincter. And I'm pretty sure that will lead to reflux and hiatus hernia. So I don't recommend burping the alphabet at all. Sorry.
Okay. All right. So I don't feel bad now.
There you go, yeah.
How much is too much in regards to farting and burping, or is there such a thing as not enough?
Well, no. I mean, the thing is, people are passing gas and burping without being conscious of it. It's going to happen in sleep, and if it's relative events, it's not something that you'll consciously make note of. You're going to make note of it if you're passing a fair amount. I mean, this is a number of normal autonomic things that happen in your body without you necessarily being conscious, like breathing, for example. But if you're taking a lot of shallow respirations, then hopefully you'll notice, or someone's going to notice and say, "Boy, are you okay? You're breathing really shallow." Or if you're taking lots of deep breaths, that's also an issue. So it's always good to know yourself and know what's normal. I mean, very few of us are born with genetic defects that give us a chronic problem, something like cystic fibrosis, where you've always got lots of mucus, you just don't know what it's like to not have any. But most of us know what it's like to not have mucus, and we know what it's like to have a little bit too much because you start to notice it. So when the body is healthy, you don't notice it. It's like
Yeah.
Driving a brand new car, everything works. You don't even have to think about it. When you like our van right now, with a little piece of plastic in the indicator, is broken. So I got to manually, flick back the indicator off every time I turn the corner. So my car is, it just needs that little piece fixed. But a brand new car you have to worry about that. So likewise, when the body is healthy and functioning well, you won't notice any problems. It's actually the absence of problems and symptoms which is an indicator of health. So, yeah, people don't need to worry. If they're not noticing that they're burping and farting very much, and going, God, maybe I'm not burping enough, it's okay for the most part. I mean, there might be like, a 0.00001% chance that maybe that might indicate some big issue, but I think for most people, that's great. Thumbs up.
Okay. All right. And one woman in the chat is pregnant, and she's wondering about farting and burping during pregnancy. She was told that it naturally is increased during pregnancy. Is that true?
Well, I mean, you've got this huge growing mass in the middle of your abdomen, squishing on all your digestive organs, and so it creates a certain amount of chaos and dysregulation. So a lot of women will notice that there are issues like that, reflux and gas and, bloating, maybe some constipation, some diarrhea sometimes. If those things are relatively mild, then they don't need any treatment other than just to make sure that the digestion is functioning well and making sure that that's reliant upon whether or not you're eating a diet that's appropriate to you. And so we can help those little symptoms for sure. They're nothing to get hugely worried about because they are normal, simply because the pregnancy itself represents a little bit of a stress to the body. But if we can ameliorate that stress by recommending an appropriate diet or maybe using some herbs, for example, for a lot of pregnant women and also moving in towards lactation later on, I recommend herbs like dill seed, coriander seed, cumin seed, fennel seed, ginger root. You can make a nice tea of those herbs and just drink that maybe 2 to 3 cups a day. When you're lactating, you can drink it, and it'll prevent griping and colic in the baby, and it will enhance breast milk production.
Okay. All right.
Yeah, so we can recommend those things too. If this lady has some gas or bloating during her pregnancy, those are pretty safe herbs to take. They're food herbs. They're herbs that you might otherwise put in your food, and so they're very safe and they're effective.
All right. Excellent. Thanks so much for that. And it looks like we have a caller on the line, Todd. So if you don't mind, let's get to them. Area code 715. Welcome to the show.
Hello.
Hi there. How you doing tonight?
Doing good. I do a lot of research and studying, and I've been studying how magnets can actually alter your molecular frequency.
Huh, what do you think about that, Todd? Because I know a lot of people are pushing, wear these magnetic bracelets and it'll set your balance back in alignment. Is there any truth to that?
Magnets in particular, there is some evidence that shows efficacy for that type of therapy. There isn't a lot of evidence, and because of that, there are a lot of claims out there. So there's just enough evidence to suggest that there's some legitimacy to it, perhaps, but there are a lot of people making claims that just simply aren't supportable. And I think a lot of people are making a lot of money selling products to people with a lot of marketing hype and language that makes it sound like it's maybe more efficacious than it is. The criteria is that, you can talk about electromagnetism and you can talk about nutrients and physiological balance in the body, but if you haven't really studied what those concepts mean in depth, like you haven't been to school and you haven't studied the science of that, and it's pretty difficult to understand what they really mean. And that's unfortunate. And it's not to say that, you can't drive a car if you don't understand how it works, but you're also not designing cars or criticizing car makers. Unless it's not working for you, there's some practical issue. But what I'm saying is that if you need a bachelor's of science to really properly understand the conversation or to assess a product, then we have a problem, because you shouldn't need a bachelor's of science to understand how your body functions and how to treat it. There's some basic concepts and ideas that Ayurveda can articulate and provide you with a model that is very effective and efficient in terms of understanding your own health and well-being. But it's a radically different way to look at the body. And the basic dichotomy or separation between the two different types of medicine is that science is concerned with measuring things. If you go to the doctor, he wants to know how high your cholesterol is, how high your triglycerides are, how high your blood pressure is, all these different measurements, and then on the basis of those measurements, they infer hopefully some kind of accurate understanding of what's happening in your body. Sometimes, it's not very accurate. Mm-hmm. A lot of false positives in different tests. Ayurveda isn't concerned with measurement. There's very little measuring that's happening in Ayurveda. Instead, we're looking at quality. We're looking at the relative balance of different qualities. Case in point, I had a patient who came to me. She was postmenopausal. She was having issues with intercourse, painful intercourse. And what happens with women as they age is their body gets drier. And so she went to the doctor, originally put her on hormone replacement therapy, because the doctor looks at that issue and goes, well, that dryness is caused because of a deficiency of estrogen. Therefore, you have an estrogen deficiency disease. Let's give you some estrogen. Unfortunately, using HRT increases your risk of breast cancer and other reproductive cancers, so that was stopped. The alternative to that was taking an estrogen suppository and inserting that into the uterus. Mm-hmm. That still causes your body to be exposed to high levels of estrogen. And that's not acceptable, because that still increases your risk. So she came to me with this issue, and what did I do? I didn't make any of those measurements. She told me she was dry, so all I had her do was just apply oil to her entire body, and especially that area down there, twice a day. And she did that for me twice a day, and I said, and also when you have any sex, use it. She was postmenopausal, so she had a partner, so she didn't have to worry about condoms and stuff, so she could just use that. And she came back 2 weeks later, and she said, oh, that's fantastic. The sex is great, and, I feel so juicy. And like her whole life had been transformed just by that one little measure. Now, on the one hand, you have a measurement-based approach to health and healing. It didn't work and actually has a high degree of risk. And on the other side, you have a qualitative-based assessment, which directly treated the quality she was experiencing and resolved it without any risk. A food-grade oil, there's nothing wrong with putting sesame oil or coconut oil on your body. There's no harm in that. Mm-mm. None. And it was effective. And so by looking at the body from a qualitative perspective, we can actually effectively treat things more efficiently than if we try to measure things and use externally applied models to things, which sometimes we don't even really understand. Mm-hmm. Think about the thing that drives people the most. Things like love. How do you measure love? You can't. There's no way to measure love. And even scientists have a love story. They have romances. They don't understand them either. But yet they're still motivated by love. And we know that love is a quality which brings goodness to people. We all love to be loved and feel and express that love. But we have no way of measuring it. And yet we know what it is. And so when we understand that essential paradox, we know what love is. We know what the quality of love is. We know how to understand our body and our experience from that qualitative perspective. So we know what dry, hot, cold, light, heavy, wet, all those qualities are, and we can treat them. So when you're too cold, I'm going to use remedies to warm you up. When you're too dry, I'm going to use remedies to moisten your body. When you're too light, I'm going to use remedies to ground you and to add bulk to your body. So all these different qualities are basically very sophisticated analyses of many different components that represent some dysfunction in your physiology that we can treat on a very simple premise. Yeah. And on that basis, you can treat anything in Ayurveda, and you don't even need to measure anything at all. Without a blood test, you can apply remedies effectively.
Excellent description there. And it's about getting back to the basics, I guess. Would you say that's one of the main differences between Western science, where you need to have a medical degree to understand what they're talking about, versus Eastern philosophies towards wellness?
Well, absolutely. It is getting back to basics. It's such a simple concept that I'm trying to illustrate here. And in India, traditionally, everybody knows it. So Ayurveda is practiced by grandmas all the way up to the most skilled surgical practitioners of Ayurveda. And believe it or not, Ayurveda has a branch of medicine that relates to surgery. And they've practiced surgery in Ayurveda for about 4,000 years. So there's an enormous degree of spectrum of knowledge there. But the basic ideas, the basic principles are the same. And on a very simple level, we need to understand things like how to treat yourself when you feel too cold. Like, how do you treat cold when you have poor circulation and your hands and feet are cold and your digestion's weak and your metabolism is cold, so you're gaining weight and you're feeling depressed and you're having a hard time thinking. That's all cold. We can treat that by applying remedies which warm you up. It's very interesting how simple and effective this approach is. It has a great deal more sophistication than people think when you use this model. Just like how showing someone love actually can improve all parameters of your life when you feel loved. Suddenly everything gets better, right? Mm-hmm. It's because it's such a powerful way to understand the quality of your experience. And so if you can address the quality of your experience, then you get to the heart of the issue, because there's no other way in which we experience life except through its quality. We don't experience numbers. We don't experience measurements. We experience quality.
Excellent. I totally agree with that, and I hate to kind of cut you off here, but we only have a couple minutes left.
Absolutely.
Todd, I just want to mention you have some recent events where you are speaking in public, and, of course, your online tuition. So can you tell us all about that and where we can learn more from you?
Well, I've been practicing now for 17 years, and I have developed a distance learning program, a correspondence course in Ayurveda called Inside Ayurveda, and it represents many years of research study and clinical practice. So it's not something that has just been developed over a weekend or something I just learned. It's something that I've really lived for the last 17 years and practiced and seen results with. And so I developed this as a distance learning program. And it's actually suited to beginners, people who maybe just have a barest of familiarity with yoga but kind of want to get into that lifestyle, all the way to health practitioners like chiropractors or doctors that wish to understand and begin to incorporate some of these principles into their practice. And as I say, it represents about 90 hours of classroom training. And it's all up online. And I'm just about to launch that. And we're doing some pre-orders. And if folks wanted to check it out, they would just go to my website, toddcaldecott.com, and then just click on Study. And when you click on Study, it'll take you to a description of that course and how you can learn more about it.
Excellent. Thank you so very much for taking time out of your busy day to spend it with us and share your wisdom with us. You're always a pleasure, and I hope to have you back. I'd definitely like to continue the conversation about Ayurveda, true Ayurveda, that is. So thank you again, Todd Caldecott. .com, and thank you all for joining us here tonight and choosing to spend your time with us as well. Blessings and love to you all.